Good morning, everybody. John Sfiocca here for GAI Insights. Bring you the Gen AI news, rating your news essential, important, or optional, putting thoughts in your head and time in your day. We've got all kinds of things going on here. We've got a very nice story about the use of Amazon SageMaker to help the Indeed company make that work. New motion capture models, which are pretty cool. Some new voice stuff from GPT-4 and more. So let's see. We've got a first story here that I'm going to ask Luda to take a look at. This is a post that talks about a new model that called Hover, which has been built in the NVIDIA stack, and it helps capture motion better and more easily than previous models in a very small model. Luda, what do you think here?
I was between optional and important. So it is, I think, a core functionality for robots. So what they are doing is essentially put various operations of how we move the body as we walk into functions, right? And they can command those robots, but everything, the balance, the how you and all of the signals are coordinated into these tasks. As you can see, the robots are quite movable, right? And change directions and move around. So I find it is a fundamental new development, and that can be essentially applied to any robot trained in the NVIDIA stack. So I was between optional for the overall reader, but I think for the robots field, it's a very important development. So between optional and important.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting too. You can capture, head and eye movements and so forth with the Apple Vision Pro, and the input devices are kind of fun. Hey, Paul, just so you know that you've got like a light coming down over your face here. I don't know what's going on there.
It's God. It's God.
What if both think optional or important? We're on the fence here.
John, I keep going back to what Mass Robotics presented at conference, that all this humanoid robotic stuff is an absolute waste of time and money, because all the money is in functional specific robots and not spending all this time walking around. So I think it's all a novelty item.
So what do you think, Tim? Novelty? We can't hear you, Tim.
Tim, you're on mute.
Yes, Adam said he was hearing background noise, so I want to. Anyway, I think it's optional. I think it's interesting. I think robots are going to be really important. So at the trend level, if you're in robotics, you probably need to read and learn about this. But outside of robotics, this is a research thing. And to Paul's point, Paul, I might argue that humanoid robots are still going to be useful for lots of things, mostly because we know how humans do things. So yes, task-specific robots will be really important, as you see now these days in manufacturing. They don't look much like humans a lot of the time. But I still think this is optional for the moment.
All right, we're headed for optional. Adam, you good with that?
Yeah, I was on the fence as well. There's a couple of things, whether we make it optional or important, I think they're worth mentioning. One is the fact that you can do a year of training in 50 minutes of wall clock time on a single GPU is extraordinary, right? 10,000 times faster than real time. The other thing is that this is a 1.5 million, not billion parameter model, which is tiny, right? We've been talking about billions or sub 1 billion, but this is 1.5 million, which is so very small. It's really extraordinary. Mostly, though, I wanted to call out that this is using NVIDIA Isaac. And we actually covered that in an announcement back in 3 months ago. But this is the first I've seen of anyone actually using Isaac and bringing a product to market. That's the actual specific tool from NVIDIA that they use to build Hover. So Isaac is worth noting, just getting onto the radar that people are starting to build with it. But yeah, to Paul's point and Tim's as well, this is probably optional for our listeners.
Okay, so we're going to go for optional here. All right, next, let's see. We've got Mastercard is teaming with Databricks to create a GenAI assistant that helps with onboarding of new customers and also creates a whole new platform for them to create other AI assistants like a number of companies seem to be doing. So let's see, we had Tim on this one. What do you think, Tim?
I think it's a pretty light description, so there's not a lot of detail here. So despite the fact that I love back pocket use cases, as we call them, I'd probably give this one an optional at this point, just because of the lack of detail on what they actually did and what they're actually using it for. It's significant. I mean, just because Mastercard is such a huge brand, but it's just not a lot of meat on the bones here.
Yeah, not really a long or detailed story here. What do you think, Luda?
Yeah, Tim, with your back pocket, lower pocket, I still think that it's a use case. And they've released it, right? And it's facing customers type of an application, despite the security and stuff. So this is important for me. So I'm thinking, yeah, I was between optional and important, and now thinking it's an important case to highlight.
Okay.
I think the one, if you can scroll down, John, it's right near the bottom of the article. And this is why I thought it might be lower back pocket. Yeah, stop right there. See those last three paragraphs. You've got AWS and Smartsheet, Amazon and their generative AI powered assistant and Expedia group. So you have three more use cases that they just tucked in as sort of footnotes at the bottom of this article. So you're really getting a 4-for-1 in terms of using this as a point of reference. And that's, I think, what tipped it over for me into important. But I was definitely on the fence as well, Tim. The article itself is very light on.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't argue with important. And that's a good point. I had forgotten about those.
All right. We're headed for important. What do you think here? Can you live with that, Paul?
I do, and I think I want to note that Money 2020 is the premier fintech conference. It's occurring right now in Vegas, 13,000 people. The president of Anthropic is one of the keynote speakers, and we've talked about fintech being in the crucible in terms of our WINS framework. So I think important is something to monitor.
All right, we're headed for important. Important it is. All right, let's go to the next one here. We have Indeed, and in this one, we have a pretty detailed case study.
Sorry, John, before you go to that, did you see Kevin's comment on Databricks?
No. Here,
I just posted.
Interesting move. Started Spark processing, became yes. Yes, adjacencies, absolutely, Kevin. It's fascinating. There's a wonderful book by Al Chandler, a business historian. It's called the Visible Hand. Talks about the history of managerial capitalism. He says, look, there's 5 ways you can diversify: geography, competency, customer, channel, and product. And they're clearly doing it with product here, so maybe channel as well. Wonderful new kind of capability. All right, so we're with SageMaker here. We've got the creation of a new set of capabilities for Indeed, the world's largest job matching service. Kind of interesting. We, on Indeed, Paul, you were just at that job fair, Boston, Massachusetts job fair that you helped put together. And that, you were hearing how the whole process of using Indeed as a platform was kind of broken. But anyway, interesting new capability they're putting on top of this. So, what do you think about this, Adam?
So I was optional or important. I'm going to lean towards important, and I'll explain why. 2 days ago, we talked about Amazon Bedrock, and we called it important because we had a very detailed use case. And it was one of the first times where the use case actually really got under the hood and gave the details about how they had applied it. And here we see, again, Amazon SageMaker. I think this is the first time we've really had an opportunity to deeply understand how they put one of these things together, with diagrams about functionally how it was designed and where the LLM servers sit in the stack. And for that reason, and as we discussed the other day, Amazon still being the market share of the cloud compute out there for enterprise, I thought this could be considered an important article.
Yeah, a lot of details here in terms of how they implemented it. Nice diagrams, proxy layer, request, response, how it then goes into the LLM where they're getting it. So we have a push for important here. What do you think, Tim? We're losing you here, Tim.
Muted again. I agree on important. I think the diagrams are the least interesting things about the article. They're good, but they're still pretty high level. But the detail within the article about what they did is important in my mind for two reasons. One is it actually tells you what they did in some reasonable level of specificity. So that's very helpful. Two, they're in production, a lot of production. And three, they did all this fine-tuning small models in-house. And so, and in fact, they even, that was the most interesting part of the article from my perspective, is they basically built their own internal, almost OS, or at least pipeline, let's say, to create new models instantly once a new model's available. They're using all open source. So this is important as a bellwether to me. Indeed's not a tiny company. They're not maybe, Mastercard, but they're a significant brand out there. They're using this in production, and they're doing it with open source, internal, fine-tuned, task-specific, lots of things we've been talking about that are very different from the, okay, let's just wind up ChatGPT 4.0 or something.
All right. Luda, you okay with important on this one?
Yeah, I'm okay with important on the technical side of how they did it. I am with Paul proclaiming that this whole online looking for a job process is broken. So I would like to test Indeed, in fact, to see whether this makes any difference, because it's more of the same broken process. Maybe they see, the problem is currently you can maybe find the jobs if they are not outdated online, and then you can't get anybody to talk to. You can't get through the wall to the people. So people, in companies, people are looking for good talent, and there's tons of talent looking for jobs, and these platforms are broken. So I'm skeptical, let's put it this way, that this would make any difference.
All right. So
we speeded up the boat headed towards the iceberg.
All right.
Exactly.
Important it is. All right.
John, before we go, I do want to kudos to Tim. Tim, I thought your explanation was super succinct and right on.
Yeah.
I just want to add to what Tim was saying. It was Jensen Huang has been using this term recently, an AI factory. And I think that's almost what they have here, Tim, is you're sort of looking for what's the word to describe what they've built. And I think it really is that new, almost a factory in terms of an intelligence layer on top of the data.
Yeah. As Kevin notes, Amazon is putting some really meaty cases out there in terms of trying to help the developers get to the next level. All right. We're going to
the other thing that we shouldn't let go by, in fact, I forgot until now, is the cost of inference was 70% reduced, something like that.
Yes.
So we've been talking of late about the importance of inference costs and how that's going to start to become really important in TCO conversations. And this was an enormous savings in inference costs.
It was 70% of the prior, so it's 30% reduction.
30%, sorry. But still, that's pretty significant.
Still significant, very significant, yeah.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to give important on this one. Next, we're headed to this article by our friends from Cornell, or at least on the Cornell, Arvik site, where we've got small models being used to bootstrap larger models. In this case, a 1.5 billion parameter model helping at a 2+ billion parameter model, helping it learn faster by leveraging small model learning. What do you think on this one, Paul?
I think it's interesting. I think it's in the same theme of everything's getting better. This is a research paper, optional for the AI group.
Yeah, it's from our friends at Google, DeepMind. Luda, what do you think?
It's actually a trend, right? Usage of small models in training the larger models. Two innovations here that they've essentially used the small model to highlight the training data that is of relevance, right? And then transfer the weights or the function of how the model did it to the larger model. And it's actually quite a significant impact on the quality of the larger LLM. And they did it with two small models, so both are rather small. So it's I think it's a very good step in this whole small model to large model development. But overall, optional, I think. Not many people are training their own LLMs, I don't think.
Yeah, very interesting in terms of innovation. I think many, excuse me, many market watchers, I think, are missing or not giving enough attention to this kind of algorithmic and model building innovation, I think. And we just saw, in the first article, how teeny that model was that created, good capture and speeding up, years of activity into minutes. Anyway, optional, and we'll keep an eye on this general trend. Okay, folks, okay with optional on this one? All
Yeah,
right.
I think it is an example of how we're almost in an explosion of math, which is another reason it's going to be optional, because most people won't be able to read it. But the reality is, it reminds me of sort of when Poincare. Well, I won't go into math history, but it's an explosion of time because this new math is just brand new, and so every day or every week there is some new variation on the math that seems to have quite some promise. So we'll have to see if the theory turns into practice. But I think you're going to see a lot of this for the next several years, really, at least.
It's very engineering focused too, right? It's not just pure math. I mean, they're applying this out and then, looking at what the results are in the model.
Right. Well, this is applied math, we might say. Yes.
But it is
what engineering is largely.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very instructive, Tim, right? So in essence, you can repeat this if you're training like Mastercard, right? Or if you're training the model for a certain application with your own data, using a smaller model and using this methodology it can be done very easily, actually. So
Yes,
very instructive.
interesting. It's one of the you remind me, Tim, when I was at Harvard College, the applied math department, we used to call it Apple Math, and one of the reasons that Harvard, really kind of led MIT on computer science, and a lot of the reason it kind of lost the plot to MIT for a while was because they didn't do applied things; they just did pure things. So they left the engineering to the folks down the street. All right, we're gonna go for optional on that one. We've got a next article here. It talks about how our friends at Universal are doing a deal with. I'm trying to remember the name of the company. They're doing a deal with
someone I'd never heard of. Yeah, Clay Vision.
Yeah.
To basically, as I understand this very short article, to make sure that their artists, if you build it with Clay Vision, you have the right copyrights and so forth, and you license them from Universal. So really trying to solve the problem that way. What'd you think here, Tim?
I think this is optional. If you're in the music industry, you should read it, but it'll take you 2 minutes at most. There just isn't much here. The music industry has been really good at stealing defeat from the jaws of victory for 30 years now. And we'll see how they do this time. They tend to litigate before they innovate. It's usually not a good plan in a tech-driven world. And they've done that here, but at least they're moving a little faster on the innovation side. The thing that I always am skeptical of is we don't know if there's any back dealing here. We don't know why they did this deal with these folks. Maybe they own Clay Vision, right? And at
Yes.
the end of the day, what they really want is just more publishing rights because they know how much money they make that way.
I was reading this, Tim, to your point, and thinking, what type of terms Clay Vision got? Probably zero ownership, and it's really just consulting, good consulting. I think that's all.
We'll see. But they're clearly staking their position to get in the game. So they're doing it much faster than they did in the last big revolution to streaming. So we'll see if they do better this time.
All right, we're headed for an option on this one. Paul, Adam, what do you guys think?
Yeah, optional. The thing I wonder is like how, and I think about this too with Adobe. Like they say, oh well, we do ethical AI because we trained on all this stuff we own, but they took it all, right? So is if Universal isn't giving it out to all the artists and all the people, like Clay can say they have ethical AI because they trained on Universal and they had a contract, but Universal's just taking advantage of all the IP they have, right? Which isn't actually remunerating the people that originally were the artists in the first place.
Right. This is never really about the artists.
Yeah.
Well, but they get into data, don't they? I mean, the artists do have. I mean, they do get royalties out of Universal if they've got, depending on.
Yeah, if you were in a certain movie, but they aren't going to say, oh well, this model was trained on 1% from this movie and they referenced it this time, so that's going to go back to this artist. I mean, Universal's getting that money.
It will be teensy weensy little bit.
Yes,
that's like Spotify. Most artists make nothing from Spotify and Apple Music. Absolutely nothing. They do get royalties, but they've managed to squeeze them down to the point where it's not even close to a livable wage for most artists.
I still get a teeny check from Harvard Business School for cases I sell. There you go. All right. Last but not least, so we're going to do optional on this one. And last but not least, let's see, we are going to look at our friends at OpenAI bringing voice through ChatGPT to PCs and Macs. I can't wait to use this morning. So you can speak directly to it, and that's about the whole article right there. What do you think on this one, Adam?
I'm on the fence. For me personally, it's important. The latency with the advanced voice mode is now down to where you can stay in the flow while you're working and be having a conversation. And I've already been experimenting with this today. I brought up an Excel spreadsheet, and I just had GPT in the background, and I was talking to it, and it was walking me through how to make a pivot table. But to actually be able to have the interaction at 200 to 300 milliseconds and have it actually walking you through step by step while you're not even looking at it, while you're in another window and you're just having a conversation, it's like someone's sitting there with you and giving you a hand as a tutor or an assistant, and it's really quite something. So I could make an argument for important, but the reality is it can't do much yet, and you could be using it on your phone, or you could be doing a lot of other things to get that kind of assistance without it actually talking to you. So debatably important.
So Adam, let me make the case for essential. See if I can pull it out of here. I mean, to me, I in my mind, we're moving to, I have 5,000 knowledge workers, and we're going to have 5,000 co-intelligence for each one of them. And I think this idea that we're going to start having this co-intelligence that's around me all the time that I can easily speak to as a scientist at Moderna, a stock trader, a sales rep, is moving towards that. And I think having a form factor both in the hand and both in the phone and now in the device is a really important thing. And I think, John, it also leads to the explosion of token use that we keep seeing more and more out there.
All right, so the case for essential here, I would also put on essential. I really love the voice interface myself in terms of how I use these devices, and I think the idea, just the way you put it, Adam, where it's kind of sitting there in the background, another kind of dimension of your work. I don't know, Luda, what do you think?
As a step in the direction of the future that is to come, I'm actually pretty sure that this will be how we will work with these devices. It will be in the background, and through voice we can command them. It can't do much yet, as Adam said. So maybe that's why it's important rather than essential. But an indication that this is to come is essential. So I can back essential.
When you say it can't do much, I know what you mean.
It's not internet connected. You can't give it files. If you paste anything else into the chat, it goes to the old voice mode. And the reality is, a lot of corporate enterprise, you can't even install it on your own machine.
And
Right? So what's currently available is still pretty limited.
And it doesn't quite understand accents very well, and other languages very well. It makes mistakes and the like. So there's a lot of improvement to be made. I just spoke to it in Russian this morning, and it just went blah.
What are you doing? Okay, Tim, we're headed for important. Sounds like on this one. What do you think?
Yeah, I think important, if not essential. I mean, the thing is, this has been out on other devices, I think, right? This is a product announcement. Usually we don't give it that much emphasis, that they're just expanding their platforms. But I agree, for better or for worse, business people in particular like to speak. They don't like to write. They don't like to read that much. And so this will be very important as an enabler and as a mediator to the powerful capabilities underneath. So I think it's the old voice was still pretty good, and this is just an improvement. That's the other way to look at it too. They already have voice recognition that's pretty good, but it has some latency, and as Adam points out, it doesn't quite feel like a conversation with a partner. This really does, so it is important from that perspective. And so, yeah, I could even go with essential. Yes, it has a long ways to go, but I do think this is where we're headed.
Okay, so we're on the fence between important and essential here. All right, I'm going to go down on important, I think. All right.
Oh,
and I'll just put in the plug here. We'll do a live demo of it on next week's Learning Lab. So
All right.
Stay tuned for that.
All right. So we are at important on that one, which gives us a tote that looks like this. We've got hover. And I also think, Ashish makes a good point that the future's coming piece by piece here. We've got the whole notion of the new kind of use case, if you will, that looks very different. And Kevin Swain as well. Okay, well, you guys are, as you weigh in here, I guess I'm reaching toward essential. Let's see if we get essential on the last one here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and change that to essential when we go back for the thing. So we have, let's see here. I'm going.
One essential, 2 importance, and 3 optionals.
Yes, that's where we are. I'm just trying to save this quickly enough and upload the new file so that we can do it. Or let me do the presentation a little differently.
Hey, John, while you're doing that, I really want to acknowledge Ram and Ashish and Michael and Lucinda and all the conversation. It's really a joy and brings a lot when everyone's contributing and rating as co-raters and participants. So thank you all.
And Kevin is joining us tomorrow.
And Kevin, thank you. Yes, I know I missed it.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Are we looking at the new one with essential? Yes. So there we have essential, optional, 2 importance, 2 optionals, 3 optionals, 2 importance, and an essential. All right. And I agree it's going to be voice mode. All right. So any announcements, Paul? We got Monday coming up.
Yeah, Monday with Learning Lab, we have Humphrey from Clipper, who's got a very interesting GenAI application that goes on the devices for police. And then the week after that, we have a deep fake vendor walking through where actually we are with deep fakes and what actually can be done, if anything, around it. So 2 exciting weeks coming up the next 2 weeks in Learning Lab.
And I think Adam's going to do some stuff in the Monday Learning Lab as well. Is that right?
Adam's going to walk through.
The demo of advanced voice mode. Yeah. You betcha.
All right.
And the other news, John, is we just signed a contract for GAI World 2025. It'll be September 29th and 30th at the Heinz Convention Center.
There we go. So mark the date. All right, everybody. Thanks. Have a great weekend, and thanks all the raters. Talk to you on Monday. Bye-bye.
Happy Friday and happy